Okay, people are still filtering in here, so I'll wait a minute. Thank you. Is that everyone? Okay. So I want to preface this with the fact that it may seem like I know what I'm doing. I do not. It may seem like I'm an expert or I've been doing this professionally for a while. I haven't. So I kind of just learned everything as I'm going. And this is my first talk, so I guess here goes nothing. So today I'm working on, I'm presenting 3D printed canister launchable drones for city scale war driving, or how I got phone calls and emails from, defense contractors and added to 18 watch lists, and well, only part of that is a joke. All right, is this gonna work? First, let me introduce myself. Hopefully. Oh, well, I broke it. Off to a great start. Try that one more time. Please don't ban me. Thank you. Okay. Burn notice references aside, I have several names. Most people know me as Glytch. There are no letters before or after that name, and I haven't graduated from MIT yet. That said, for better or worse, people regard me as a knowledgeable person in the fields of drones, robotics, and, 3D printing. Why? Well, it probably has something to do with the fact that I competed in first FTC and FRC robotics competitions in high school. I started building drones in 2013, got into 3D printing around the same time, designed and built my first 3D printed drone in 2014, and have worked on all kinds of ridiculous things since, like the rocket launching robot and the, rocket launcher you saw in the previous clip. Yes, that robot worked. That wasn't CG. They were all, sitting there firing rockets that drove around. It was awesome. I have more about that and some of my other projects on youtube.com/glitch. And something else I've worked on here, this is actually my first drone that I designed and 3D printed. And that's kind of what got me started down the whole line of designing and 3D printing tiny drones. Okay, that's not working, so we'll put that away. Next slide. Okay, so what am I doing here today? Today I'm working on solving problems, and today's problem is mapping and war driving at city scale. That means finding radio sources such as Wi-Fi access points, cellular signals, ESSIDs, and as a result, the people tied to those numbers. Basically, we're doing SIGINT, or signals intelligence, but I figured that was too formal of a term to use in the title, so I'm using war driving as a catch-all term for the stuff I mentioned above. Anyway, how do we solve this problem? Well, when I see a nail, everything's a hammer, or at least I think that's how that phrase goes. A lot of you know that I have been interested in drones for several years. Some of you may be familiar with Project Cuckoo, the Wi-Fi pineapple drone in the top left. As it implies, it's carrying a Wi-Fi pineapple on a 3D printed chassis I designed and printed. There's a couple videos on Hack5 about that. It was a project that kind of got a lot of you familiar with me. What else here? The one in the top right is the endurance-oriented modular drone I designed and 3D printed as well. It has a flight time of like 25 minutes, and it can carry anything from 4K cameras to, Wi-Fi pineapples, Raspberry Pis, and other such things. In the bottom left, in the bottom right, that is Scout, that's Navi, and we just don't talk about Navi. That was not a good project. That's an example in failure, but, and then in the bottom left, there's Scout, which is a folding pocket-sized drone. It did all right. There's definitely some improvements that could be made on that one. But for the ground we're attempting to cover, most of those drones wouldn't do the job. We are trying to map an entire city in a matter of minutes. And a lot of those drones are just too heavy, too large, too expensive to deploy dozens of, which is what we need to do in order to effectively and quickly map at this scale. On top of that, they lack advanced control options for command and control and just generally cooperative, and just in general cooperative navigation and mesh networking. There's no real software for that in the public sector. And a lot of that is necessary for what we're trying to do. We need to have a lot of drones working together in a very rapidly deployable way. So, hang on here. Now, rapidly deployable drones do exist, but a lot of them cost 2 to 10 times what I make in a year. This is the part where I joke about supporting my Patreon. No, please, I need to eat. Not only are rapidly deployable drones that exist expensive, but if you would like that year's salary worth of drone to explode in a ball of fire and shrapnel, that'll cost more, about 3 times more. Yes, I checked. Up here we have the AeroVironment Switchblade. This gets deployed from a little backpack mount, or backpack carryable mount, and that is the $70,000 one that explodes, and it is really cool technology, but, you know, I'm not in the business of killing people, so we're trying to find people, not kill them. The other drone down here is the Raytheon Coyote, and it gets launched from tubes as well. In the picture there you see I think that's a P-3 Poseidon sub-hunter aircraft that got repurposed for hurricane hunting. And they will actually fly through hurricanes, deploy these drones, and get even more data and info and coverage from the hurricane. And you can also make those blow up too with an optional warhead. Now, the cool thing about those drones is they can also be deployed in a swarm fashion. The problem is you need a semi-trailer to do so. The internet here is great. So here you can see it being deployed from a trailer-mounted assembly. And the other option is to deploy drones from an F-16. This is the Perdix Swarm. It is one of the largest and most recognized drone swarm projects currently being developed by DARPA. These are little drones that get deployed out of flare tubes on an F-16 fighter jet, and they actually assembled and deployed 100 of these. And you can see this is a sped up clip here just for brevity, but they will circle around the points on the left, navigate to a point in the middle, and then to a point on the right. And after this, you will see them from the ground. And these are with zoom lenses, professional photographers trying to get video and pictures. These are the most in-focus clips I could find. This gives you an idea of just how hard it is to detect these things. And now you can imagine trying to shoot these down with something like a battle rifle or something. You don't, you just hide. While we're talking about defense contractors and lighting money on fire, let's get back to that subtitle for a moment. Despite publicly expressing my disinterest time and time again about working on defense projects and just wanting to work on search and rescue, I've gotten multiple six-figure job offers from defense contractors who I'm not going to give the privilege of naming, as well as dozens of other emails and calls from interested parties. And while that's great and all, and I could definitely use the money, who here has played Call of Duty Black Ops 2? So you probably know where I'm going with this. This is the hunter-killer drone from that game. And a lot of my inspiration for the drone that you'll see later is derived from this, from the aesthetics of this. Now, the reason I declined those aforementioned job offers is because, while I know how to excel in such fields, I don't want to contribute to this problem. And, well, you saw the swarm there. So what can we do to avoid getting involved with those faceless mega death corps? Well, we can make them not explode for starters. Making them recoverable and reusable would be good. Quieting them down by ditching 3 of the rotors would also make them lighter and cheaper as well. And we can also use off-the-shelf parts to further reduce the cost, like these open-source flight controllers from Omnibus and Talon. Those run iNav, an open-source drone firmware. And also, we could make them rapidly deployable via grenade launchers. I mean, it's a CO2-powered grenade launcher meant for airsoft, but it's still a grenade launcher. This will subject the drones to less G-forces than their gunpowder counterparts, and also cost substantially less, and you don't need the tax stamp for each shell. It costs over $250, and it only applies to that one shell, so once you fired it, it's gone. You are literally setting money on fire. Anyway, the airsoft version of the M32 rotary grenade launcher could theoretically launch 6 drones as fast as you can pull the trigger, though you need to allow for some time so the drones don't collide into each other on deployment, so 6 drones in 10 seconds is feasible. The other advantage of a grenade launcher that might not be readily apparent is that you are skipping one of the most energy-consuming phases of flight, and that is the launching or the deployment and climb out to getting to altitude and whatnot. And this is critical because as small of a drone we're using, we don't really have room for a lot of batteries, so avoiding costly phases of flight is desirable. So what else can we do? How about modular payloads? Obvious sensors include cameras like normal daylight cameras or even thermal. Which, here's a cool thing. This is a picture I took with a side project a couple of years ago that uses a relatively cheap FLIR lepton sensor. It's a person standing over 200 feet away in pitch black, and you can see them perfectly. And the ambient temperature is 88 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's not all that different from, body temperature, and yet they stand out perfectly. You can obviously make them out. But you all aren't here to see another camera drone. There's plenty of those around. Let's talk about something other than visual spectrum, like the radio spectrum. Things like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular, and just RF in general. Everyone recognizes these, right? This is the Stingray that was everywhere in the news a few years ago, violating your privacy. It can operate in both active and passive modes, so you couldn't even tell it was there. You know what else can do some passive GSM sniffing? This 1-inch long software-defined radio dongle that can connect to a tiny single-board computer, all of which can fit in a grenade-sized drone. Now, one would think that would be a really expensive and advanced piece of equipment, right? Wrong. It's $29.95 on Amazon. Oh, and look, free 1-day shipping. So that's cool, but what else can we track and monitor with hardware like this? What about pagers? Who uses those anymore, right? Well, hospitals and emergency response teams. Pretty critical things. Baby monitors, need I say more? That is just creepy. And here's a fun one. Tire pressure sensors in the wheels of most modern cars have unique identifiers that are beaconed out constantly, and thus can be used to track your movements around a city. And as for Wi-Fi, well, that's an easy one. That same single-board computer equipped with a Wi-Fi dongle rather than an SDR could run something called CreepyDoll. Brendan O'Connor gave a talk called Stalking a City for Fun and Frivolity at DEF CON 21, and he discussed his work on it. As he said, it's a distributed sensor network that combines wireless sniffing and distributed command and control to do real-time personnel tracking and true identity theft on a major urban area. It is stalking as a service. Now, that sounds like a lot of what we're trying to do, but without deploying dozens or hundreds of boxes, we're going to give our boxes wings. Now, this is the Wasp drone, designed and built by people over at the Rabbit Hole. I remember this being one of the first drone projects I had ever seen, and it is quite possibly what got me into drones and InfoSec. It had me hooked. It uses a little VIA single-board computer and an old-school EDIS software-defined radio, some wireless and Wi-Fi cards, and some other hardware. And to my teenage self, it was just so cool. Never mind the fact that it had a 6-foot wingspan and was bright yellow and could be seen for miles. But as cool as it is, it's a decade old now, and by the way, it's on display at the International Spy Museum. That said, I think it could use some modernization, a new drone for a more civilized era. Now, this is work I've done in the past, as I mentioned earlier. It is the canister, or it is the Project Cuckoo, and it carries a Wi-Fi Pineapple, 3D printed chassis. You can also plug in software-defined radios, Bluetooth dongles, has a low-light camera, over 20 minutes of flight time, and can be made relatively cheaply. But I think we can do better and even smaller yet. Introducing what you've all been waiting for, the 3D printed canister launch drone, or at least the first version of it. As you can see from this CAD animation, I had some rather optimistic ideas about those tail surfaces. I'm still working through the problems and making 3D printed deployable fins on this small of a scale. And as you can see here, it does indeed fit in a 40mm airsoft grenade launcher. Notice how the fins don't fold and the prop is also rigid. It was a work in progress. These are proving to be the biggest hang-ups with this project, and the former more so than the latter. And if you look here, all of the avionics fit on a single little slide-in shim. Everything from the servos, flight controller, motor controller, RC receiver, and even the motor are all connected to this one pod. The only thing missing is the battery, and that would go in the nose of this design. I was pretty proud of how this all worked out until I did the math on how much it weighed and how fast it would have to fly in order to stay airborne. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. Oh, my battery's running low. That's lovely. It weighed nearly 150 grams and would have to have maintained over 55 miles an hour to just not stall and fall out of the sky. It made over 2 times thrust to weight ratio, so I was pretty confident it could do it, but it seemed pretty ridiculous and quite frankly scary to test. Excuse me one moment, I need to plug my laptop in or this talk will not get finished. Uh-oh. I don't think my laptop's going to turn back on. I think we're done here. Well, the problem is my laptop will not turn on unless the battery has 15% charge in it. Yeah, so it is now dead and it will not turn back on for probably another 25 minutes. So. Yes. We absolutely could. USB-C. Or even just a laptop. I do apologize. Used a lot more battery than I thought it would. Say that again? Right. I believe they had 2 hours of runtime because they had a lot of battery in that. The Wasp that was.
Yeah, how far could the plane go?
I don't know the range on it right off. I think they said something like a couple of miles. Thank you. Where can I sign it in? Yeah. I'll be changing it shortly after.
Just watch the H key, it sticks.
Yeah, I noticed. Thank you. Oh, okay. That's good on it. Good thing it's rugged. Is that HDMI? I can just plug this back in.
You just need
Yeah.
this.
Yes. We'll get this out of the way. This is going to be a fun one to edit and post. I won't actually be able to do that, so I will have to throw out the demo. Demo gods are not with me today. Do you want to set up the... And can it do extended display? Because my notes will... Sorry.
So it is extending the display.
Okay. I just need to drag something over. Okay. Thank you. I do apologize. Third, full screen? No, it doesn't work, whatever. Where were we? Talked about the pagers, the baby monitors, creepy doll, wasp, my stuff, and we are back here. The show must go on. Okay, as I was saying, I was pretty proud of how this was all coming together. Went and did the math on it though, and it wasn't pretty. It weighed over nearly 150 grams and would require it to maintain a speed of over 55 miles an hour to stay flying, which is a scary thing to test. So this is the current version, and I have it actually right here. And it is absolutely tiny. It weighs in at just 85 grams and is a bit over half the weight of the first version. I think there's room to shed more weight yet and get it under 80 grams. It uses a lower voltage battery, so it doesn't make quite as much thrust, but it still has around a 1:1 thrust weight ratio, which put simply is excessive for most aircraft. It could literally climb vertically as long as the atmosphere was thick enough. This design will also have some ripstop nylon or Tyvek in these areas here. And that will make it have some more wing area and reduce the wing loading, and which will further reduce the stall speed or the minimum speed at which the drone needs to fly in order to not fall out of the air. Now, as I'm sure you all noticed, the version 2 isn't round like the first one, which you might think doesn't lend itself well to being launched out of a grenade launcher. No worries, because a simple discarded sabot like the ones tanks use, tanks use, will take care of that. And the other advantages of using a sabot will add protection during transport, protection during launch, and it will just prevent the body of the drone from making contact with the barrel. Going this route lets the drone have a substantially slimmer profile while flying and reduces drag, and it prevents wind from pushing the drone around quite as much. This particular drone currently has a thermal camera equipped with a 5.8 gigahertz video transmitter in it. And I was going to say if I were to tempt the demo guys, but I've already tempted them and they got angry. So we won't be able to do my demo today showing the thermal camera in action. Just imagine a bunch of little white dots in the audience. And what else here I need to figure out? The thermal camera could easily be replaced with a normal daylight camera, or using a little remote video switcher circuit, I could even use both thermal and daylight and just switch as needed while in flight. Alternatively, as I've been alluding to since the beginning, the cameras and video transmitter could be replaced altogether by a single board computer and could be used in conjunction with software-defined radios, Wi-Fi cards, and combined with software like CreepyDoll and some C2 software that provide GPS waypoints for the drones to do some pretty scary citywide tracking and surveillance for not a lot of money. Depending on the exact payload and part sourcing, if you were able to bulk order parts, you could do as little as $100 per drone, and substantially less if you're running a big operation and have the purchasing power to buy parts in bulk. So why am I talking about all this? Well, I'm 23, self-taught, and have been playing with hardware like this as a hobby on and off on an extremely restricted budget for about 6 years. If I can do it and share it with you all, that raises questions about what is being done behind closed doors. Just like Brendan O'Connor said in his talk I mentioned earlier, sunlight is the best disinfectant. The more light we shed on the problem, the sooner we realize we need to address it. Until then, I plan to use these flaws in technology we rely on in our everyday lives to try and help save some lives. So, when I was 13, a relative of mine was on a winter hunting trip. He slipped and fell down a steep hill, breaking his ankle, and got knocked unconscious at the bottom. When he did not return as expected, a group of family and friends went out searching for him. He was found alive after many hours with severe frostbite. But later that evening, he succumbed to complications of frostbite and passed away in the hospital. While I wasn't personally close to him, I saw what it did to my family, and I wanted to solve that problem to help prevent more lives being lost and more tragedy as such. The good thing is, I'm not the only one thinking about these problems. Drones are already being used around the world to help save lives. Finding people on frozen lakes, elderly who get lost in the woods or fields as a result of dementia, or someone who just lost their way in some marshes. All without putting more lives at risk. That's what drones are good for. But as is, it's not good enough. According to the National Park Service, over 46,000 people went missing within a 10-year period spanning 2004 to 2014. Nearly 1,600 of them were not found quick enough, resulting in their deaths and many family tragedies. And yes, I said National Park Service, because this is just within national parks inside the United States. I could not find how many search and rescue operations happen throughout the entire nation, let alone globally. So you can imagine this number is much, much larger. So obviously some things still need to improve. I hope some of the ideas and thoughts I put forward today will someday help prevent someone's family going through the same experiences as mine. Whether it's using Wi-Fi and cell phone monitoring to detect beacons from someone's phone without service in a natural disaster recovery, or a swarm of drones with sensors of all types deployed from the back of response vehicles. I do think drones are not only here to stay, but will become more common, and with a little luck and some improvements to drones and the data collection systems they need, hopefully it'll be for the right reasons. Anyway, that's about all I had. It looks like we still have a few minutes. Are there any questions? Yes? Not yet. I'm trying to find a folding propeller that is of a small enough size. I have yet to find one that is 3-inch and folds in the way I need. Most quadcopter propellers fold this way. I need it to fold back this way. And so what I'm looking at is probably having one SLS printed with shapeways out of nylon or something. FDM printing won't work. This motor spins at 33,000 RPM. Yeah. Go ahead.
Why nylon is not perfect?
I don't know. 3D printing out of carbon fiber. You can get carbon fiber impregnated filament, but I don't know if Shapeways has that. I will have to look into that.
Right. Of course, it's brittle, but it's faster.
Any other questions? Okay. That should do it for me. I would like to thank you all for coming to my first ever talk. I apologize for the earlier complications, and it looks like we ran a little short as well. There are some links on screen where you can find out more about what I do, keep an eye on my projects, and feel free to reach out to me on Twitter.